Good evening, everyone. Today is Tuesday, December 14th, 2021, and this is a meeting of the Acushnet Board of Selectmen. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Very good. Gentlemen, do I have a motion to open the meeting tonight?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. First on the agenda tonight, we have minutes that need to be approved by the Board of Selectmen from June 23rd, 2020.
Motion to approve.
I don't think I was there for that.
That's right.
Second.
So moved, and I'll second.
All those in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's right, Dave, it was before your time. So, I believe that was the last meeting that Roger Cabral was chairman of the Board of Selectmen. Their meeting mail, let's move to there. First on the agenda today, we have a resignation letter from the building commissioner. And I'm going to read this out. And this is from Jim Merritt. Dear Selectmen, please accept my letter of resignation as Acushnet's building commissioner. I've accepted the position of Director of Inspectional Services in Mattapoisett with my last day of employment in Acushnet being January 21st, 2022. During my tenure, with your support, we have accomplished much, not only for the residents, but for the infrastructure that supports the programs they need and deserve. I have always looked upon Acushnet as a community well-run and one to be proud of. For the past 15 years, I have worked on behalf of the Board of Selectmen to represent the town in whatever endeavor or direction the board sought to go. Under your guidance, we have fully renovated the Marie S. Howard School into a fully functioning library, completely ADA compliant and capable of producing the type of programs a community like Acushnet needs. Similarly, we have totally renovated our COA and all internal offices within Town Hall and Parting Ways buildings. With your permission, we have initiated and have continued involvement with the state-sponsored Green Communities Act, which became a model in southeastern Massachusetts for other communities to follow. By continuing with the program, we have reached in excess of $1 million in energy-related grants used to upgrade all of the town's energy infrastructure with a 35% plus in energy savings to the town and the Acushnet taxpayer. I hope through my effort, this board will realize the importance of having a good qualified building commissioner and understand how important it is for this person to be of good moral character and his ability to react to residents and staff honestly, politely, and ethically. I believe the municipal staff in Acushnet represent some of the best and most qualified staff I have ever worked with. It would be my hope that a search for my replacement would produce an individual properly qualified under state standards to carry on the work respectfully with the staff which I have done for the past 15 years. In leaving, it will be my promise to aid in the transition and to offer my help to this board and all the staff as I am able. Sincerely, James Merritt. Well, Jim, I've worked with you for a couple of years, and we're going to need to have some big shoes to fill with your departure. I know my two fellow select board members have had more experience working with you, but I've had pleasure in working with you in this town. Gentlemen, any comments?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I echo your thoughts. I had a great chance to work with Jim on a whole host of things over the years, and the intangibles that he provided to the job were much more measurable, in my opinion, than just approving permits. And if you recall at the 9/11 ceremony, the permit that he wrote for that for that installment speaks volumes to what type of person Jim is. He'll be sorely missed, and we're thankful for the infrastructure that he has put in place for that office.
Thank you, Dave. Gaspar?
I think it's well said by both of my colleagues. I'll leave it at that.
Very good. Next on the meeting mail, we have another resignation letter from Deputy Inspector of Wires, Tom DeCosta. His isn't as long as Jim's. Dear Select Board, I would like to notify the Board that it is my intention to resign my appointment as the town's Deputy Inspector of Wires. The resignation taking effect December 31st, 2021. It has been my pleasure serving the town, the Board, and the Building Department. Tom, thank you very much for your service over the years. As people out there may remember Tom from being instrumental, in, as well as a number of other people, in building the construction of the Veterans Memorial over at Polk Park. And also, I believe it was 2 years ago, he was recognized as Acushnet Man of the Year for his services to the town. And Tom has left the building and is headed to Hampstead, North Carolina to continue his adventures there. Thank you very much, Tom. Mr. Gaspar?
Yeah, no, I think we talked about his departing the town of Acushnet quite some time ago, a few months back, and we appointed Mr. Corrigan as a deputy wire inspector. I mean, I can't say enough kind words about Mr. DeCosta for not only his friendship over the years, but also all the great things he's done with the town of Acushnet. And as you mentioned, that Veterans Memorial is something that will be there for decades. Hopefully centuries to come. So it's reminding everybody every time they drive by it just what kind of man Tom DeCosta really is. So without him and his support from his wife, Marcel, and his whole crew, the committee, that memorial wouldn't be here, and that would be quite a shame. So I'm extremely proud of the committee and Mr. DeCosta, his wife, and all the volunteers that went out there to help out building that beautiful memorial. And he served for a long time as deputy wire inspector. He's a man of integrity, so he'll be sorely missed by me, that's for sure.
Mr. Warner? I think you're muted there, Dave. You're muted. There you go.
Tom's a great guy, great service. Mr. Gasper couldn't have done it better than that. So thank you, Kevin.
Very good. And just one last thing, Tom. I'd like you to remember to leave the key to the flagpole next Veterans Day. Leave it with someone here in town. Thank you very much. Next on the meeting, we had a last minute situation on Veterans Day, but we were able to raise and lower the flag accordingly. Next on the meeting mail, we have a citizen's interest form from Alexandra Soqui, I believe. Sequoia? Well, that's Sequi. And she's interested in a position on the Cultural Council. She says she has an MAT in teaching, Hispanic background, worked with diverse students, passionate about multicultural education. So, I don't see any.
Motion to appoint Alexandra Sequoia to the Cultural Council.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Welcome to the group, Alexandra. Okay, next we're gonna deviate from our agenda slightly and go to old business. We have Chief Kevin Gallagher here tonight and talk about the fire assessment job posting for the chief's position.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Gasper, Mr. Wonauer over there on TV. Ladies, before I talk about the process by which you'll end up with a new fire chief, I want to just take a minute to amplify what you gentlemen have said about James Merritt. I've had the pleasure of working with several building inspectors over the course of my 34 years with the fire department. Jim has set the bar. Jim defines the bar for both professional and personal conduct as a building commissioner and as a public employee. And it has been an absolute honor to work alongside him for the last 15 years or so. Jim's a part of our public safety team. It's important, I think, for folks at home to know that public safety is beyond just fire, police, EMS, EMA, but incorporates the building department as well to pull together that whole array of professionals to provide public safety to this community, and Jim has been an exceptional building official, and one that we will miss. Gentlemen, let's talk about the process by which you will be replacing me in a few short months. We have a plan. I'll take a minute, if we could, just to go through that plan and then look at the first concrete step towards bringing on a new fire chief. I have made my announcement that I will be retiring in September of 2022, and worked with you gentlemen on the Board of Selectmen to come up with a plan on really creating, I think, a transition that will be seamless, that will serve the department well, and of course the public safety needs of the community. What we have determined is that we would bring in an assessment center. Badge Quest is the vendor that was selected by the Board of Selectmen. They will be coming in 90 days from Monday for a written examination for the position of fire captain and fire chief. There's a 50-question test. Those members who are interested in those positions will be provided with a job posting following this meeting and the reading list as well. 90 days from now, Badge Quest will come in, administer. It will be held over at the community room over at the police department for the candidates who are interested, a 50-question written examination, and then from there, assessment centers, evolution-based, tried and true process by which you really get to understand someone's thought process, their skills, their abilities, and they draw upon their experience. So there'll be two different tracks, if you will. Interested candidates can submit to take one or the other or both. But from that, there'll be a list developed for the Board of Selectmen to consider for your next fire chief. It's anticipated that once you have that information in the results of the assessment center and the written exam, that you will then go and appoint and then negotiate an employment contract with, and that contract would say the person will begin the day after I retire. So it will all be said and done. Hopefully this can be wrapped up in March, April at the latest. That would give us several months where immediately upon receiving notification that you have a successful contract in place, I would then promote that person to captain. And that person would be taken out of their 24-hour shift rotations and work alongside me Monday through Friday, 8 to 4, calls at night, the whole aspect of the chief's job, so that I could mentor them. Really have been mentoring the senior members of the department for several months now, but really focus in on that particular individual and have all of our attention be on transitioning from my stewardship of the department to what will be theirs. That should go pretty seamlessly. And the first step towards getting there is posting the job posting for fire chief. So we've gone back and forth, we've fine-tuned this, and I think this is an extremely good working document. So if I can, I'll just go through very quickly. The requirements are that that the candidates be full-time employees in a firefighter medic position, 7 years of full-time employment. They have to be firefighter level 1-2 trained and certified, fire officer 1 and fire instructor 1. Those are different levels of certification that you earn as you're moving through the ranks. They require study. They require a certification examination by the academy, be it written. There's some that are written and evolution-based, such as fire instructor. So that's the foundation upon which a candidate must have already achieved in order to be considered for chief. The process, by end of business Monday, December 20th, they will submit, interested candidates will submit a letter of interest to the town administrator. Next will come 90 days down the road, the assessment day, if you will. First the written examination, and then the scenario-based assessment center, which is designed to demonstrate candidates' general knowledge, fire and EMS, decision-making capabilities, incident management, crisis management, and other chief-level skills. That information then, from that day, will be weighted 60% from the scenario-based and 40% from the written exam. And then when that is done, the Board of Selectmen will receive the ranking of the candidates who have successfully completed the assessment center. That information comes to you, and in discussion with you gentlemen, a final ranking will be determined by your town administrator, who will get into the weeds of assigning 60% overall school, 60% coming from the assessment center's final exam, final score, 20% based on education, and 20% experience and training. So that gets you a grade of 100, that then, when you enter those numbers against the candidate scores, you'll then have your own ranked list for who it is that you want to appoint as fire chief. So that's the plan. This is the document that gets us going with that. There's also the captain's test that will be held that day. That will have a life, we've agreed to, of 2 years, from which the next chief will have an opportunity to take a look at what his areas of interest are, what his needs are. Once he gets a handle on day-to-day operations, has a better sense of what direction he wants to bring the department, there'll probably be some modifications to the captain's job description, of which I played a role in writing, and I don't think it's appropriate for my fingerprints to be all over that job description when a new chief is only a few months away. They should have an opportunity to shape that in the vision that they see. So we will have that capability if and when the new chief and the Board of Selectmen come to agreement on when it's best to pull the trigger on that. So what I'm hoping for tonight is approval of your approval of your job posting for the position of fire chief. I'll get that out tomorrow morning with the fire captain's job posting and get this process underway.
Just one quick question, Chief. How many current members do we have that would meet the requirements to apply for the test?
There are 3 that have the 7 years, and of those 3, there's 2 that have the certification requirements.
Okay.
Those are also the 2 that have indicated an interest in the positions.
Correct. I just didn't know if anybody else, I knew there were 2 people we've been talking about,
Right.
and I just didn't know if anybody else qualified for it. That could. All right. Very good. Mr. Gaspar, any questions?
I do not. I've spoken with Chief Gallagher, and I want to thank him for his time that he spent with me going through this and helping me understand exactly what the direction is. We're in agreement that this is a good plan. I respect the chief overall, his years of service. We had this conversation where don't expect your phone not to ring after September comes, right? Because I'm sure it's going to happen, but it's going to be a tough pair of boots to fill. You said that about Mr. Merritt, but I would say that about Chief Gallagher, because he's really the one that's brought in EMS and fire together. Not just talking budget-wise when we did that a couple of years ago, right? He's the one that's really brought the 2 departments cohesively together. So he's championed that effort. I'm extremely proud of that effort and bringing that all under one umbrella. And I feel that the chief is going to see this thing through. Whichever candidate comes out on top, we'll make sure that we have a great replacement. It'll probably take years to become what the chief has done, but with that said, we have 2 great candidates that are looking to take the assessment center, so I'm confident no matter who comes out on top, we'll be in good hands. We'll define, as the chief said, in the future, we'll define on how the department's going to be structured and look at when we have that new chief in place. We'll bring those conversations, because the conversation's a lot different than having it with somebody with his years of experience versus somebody new coming in, and the board will have that discussion on how we structure that and talk about contractual things and things of the like, but I'm all set.
Mr. Gaspar, as you know, I think our shared philosophy is the next chief should have all the abilities to shape the department the way that they think it should be run. And it could deviate a lot from the way that I think, and that's fair. But I just don't want to saddle my successor with locking them into a particular philosophy or mechanics when it really should be theirs to decide. And there's a lot of things that I'm going to look back on with pride, and one of them is the incredibly good relationship that we've had with the union. You gentlemen know that we don't bother you with grievances. We work out our problems before they ever get to this level. We do that based on the respect that's been built. And part of that respect was floating this plan by the full-timers and getting their feedback very early in the game, in the process. So that's been done. So this is, I think, a solid plan from the town's perspective. I know the employees are comfortable with the plan, and they're really looking forward to getting this moving. So
Very good. Mr. Wona?
I agree. I'm comfortable with the plan. Chief, thank you for your many years of service. I know we'll have plenty of opportunities to recognize you over the next year or so, and we want to make sure we do that accordingly. And I look forward to the two candidates advancing.
Very good. So, gentlemen, Chief, this is for Chief and Captain.
Well, technically, I'm responsible for promoting someone to a rank position. So I have authority over the job description of captain. You'll see that it mirrors that of chief with the percentages and the breakdowns and everything. So it's not too much of a stretch. But what I'm asking formally is for the Board of Selectmen to approve the job posting for fire chief. And then those two will be transmitted out tomorrow.
Very good. So, gentlemen, do I have a motion for the fire assessment chief job posting?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Very good, Chief.
Thank you, Chief.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Well,
Have a good night.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Next on the agenda, we have appointments. As some people that out there may or may not know that the town is going to be receiving ARPA money, and the town's looking into hiring consultants to help us deal with the distribution and direction we go with that ARPA money. And tonight we have Capital Strategic Solutions, a consulting firm who can help us with that process. And I see we have a Mike, Nicole, and Jennifer on the screen. So I don't know who would like to go first, but you have the floor.
Thank you. I'm happy to start. So my name is Jennifer Thompson. I'm here from Capital Strategic Solutions, and I'm here with my partners Nicole Figueredo and Michael Tassino. And I do have a small PowerPoint. Do you need me to share that up on the screen, or do you already have it in front of you?
We have it.
If you want to share it, you can too. Well, we have it on the TV screen, so it's...
Yeah, so the residents can see, could see
So
it.
you want me to share it from my screen?
Yeah, that'd be great.
That'd be great.
Okay, perfect. Just wanted to make sure. Just making sure you're all good and you can see that on the
Yes.
screen.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Again, thank you so much for having us. So just a little bit about Capital Strategic Solutions. We're a small consulting firm in Massachusetts. We're based out of Marlborough, Massachusetts. And we are all former municipal employees that have worked in the municipal sector and now do consulting. So we're a certified women-owned business. And as I mentioned, we're staffed with former municipal employees with specializations in grant writing and administration, which is a big component of the ARPA, as well as community public relations and community engagement. We also do things like crisis communication and website design and social media and some other public outreach for infrastructure projects and things along those lines. And again, we provide assistance with grant writing and administration for state and federal programs such as ARPA, FEMA, and CARES funding. So just a little bit about myself, because if you decided you wanted to hire us to come in and help you with your opera funding, I would be your project manager. I have 24 years of municipal, I had to think about that for a minute, 24 years of municipal experience. I've spent the majority of my career in municipal government. I just finished being a town manager in June after 6 years in the town of Plainville. Prior to that, I was the assistant town manager in was the town of Framingham. It's now a city, the city of Framingham. So, and then prior to that, for a few years, I was the chief financial officer in the Barnstable County Sheriff's Office. And Nicole and Mike have very similar experience in the municipal sector. And we actually all met working in Framingham. At the time, I managed all of the ARA funding. So in Framingham, we received about $250 million in ARA funding, which has some similarities to this ARPA funding that we're talking about tonight. And I was tasked with managing the finance and procurement pieces of that ARA funding. So it really exposed me to all of the federal requirements that now kind of uniquely helped, gives me some significant background that is, of particular assistance, I think, to cities and towns that are now managing the ARPA funding. So just a brief background so you know who we are and where we're coming from. So as you know, the pandemic posed a serious burden on municipalities, not just the pandemic itself, but also the additional funding, which was wonderful, that was rolled out to our communities. But the nature of the reimbursements, as you saw with your CARES and FEMA funding, was significantly complex. And it added this additional burden to your existing staff, especially, I think, your administrative and finance staff. That's what I saw when I was managing a town, this additional workload that got put on top of their regular duties. And I think what made it especially complex was the fact that the guidance and the rules kind of kept changing along the way. So I think, over the last year and a half, we have some very, burnt out and stressed out town accountants and finance directors and town administrators, because it just really was, it was a lot to manage on top of the regular duties. So some of the larger municipalities to handle ARPA hired staff. And that's great when you're in a community that is getting, $50 million or $75 million. But that's just not practical in some of the smaller and mid-range towns in Massachusetts. So many have looked at, as you are, considering hiring a consultant to kind of come in and alleviate those new workload requirements. And also just to make sure that you're maximizing what you can get for funding and making sure that you're maximizing those federal dollars for Acushnet. So our fees, our consultant services are eligible for funding through ARPA. So ARPA would pay for our services should you choose to move forward with us. So we are currently working in quite a few Massachusetts cities and towns, and we help with ARPA, CARES, and FEMA. So we're currently working in Townsend, Southborough, Pepperell, Dunstable, Groton, Holden, Gloucester, Lynn. I'll jump down to Stowe. You'll notice that Acushnet's on here. So we did help you with your CARES. So we did a small contract to help out with your CARES funding and help to maximize your funding. We helped with some of the reporting. We worked with your town accountant and your town administrator to make sure that you maximized your CARES funding and all of your reporting was done to the state. And we're thrilled. I think everyone is thrilled that the CARES piece at least is done and signed, sealed, and delivered. And now we finish closing out FEMA and we move on to ARPA. So what type of assistance do we provide to some of these municipalities? It really does differ from city to town. So, you saw some big cities in there, like Lynn and Gloucester is pretty significant. Those folks do have staff that they hired specifically to work for ARPA, but they also want us in as a consultant to advise on things like eligibility, to help with some of their public outreach around their ARPA projects. And then some of the smaller towns really need us for almost everything related to ARPA. And then I would say there's some that are really in between. Some need a lot of help with the financial reporting. Some need a lot of help with procurement. Others need help with the public outreach and helping to come up with a plan of what projects and which projects are eligible. So it kind of runs the gamut, and it really depends on what you're looking for and what you need. But the type of services we offer is we can help you out with eligibility. So assessing those projects and making sure that they are in fact eligible for ARPA funding before you move forward. We also can help with revenue loss calculations. So there's a component in the ARPA legislation that allows you to fund general government services if you experienced a revenue loss due to the pandemic. So if the town of Acushnet suffered a revenue loss, you could then fund back certain general government expenses through this lost revenue category, it's called. And some municipalities have asked us to run those revenue loss calculations for them, which we've done. Others have run their own and have just simply asked us to look them over as a second set of eyes, kind of a check and balance. So we've done that in many of our municipalities. Some communities have us come in and do presentations before their cities and towns boards. Some have working groups, and we present and help facilitate those working group meetings when it comes to ARPA. Some communities really want to have a robust public outreach in terms of soliciting input into which projects move forward in their communities, so we can assist with that. Again, we assist with the financial reporting to the Treasury Department, very similar to how we helped out with CARES and FEMA reimbursements from start to finish. Again, we provide procurement assistance if necessary, both Massachusetts procurement and federal procurement requirements, because it is federal funding. And then again, we provide that community outreach piece. Some folks really wanted more information on their social media, on their website. We have some communities that have surveys up to solicit public input. So we help with a lot of that as well. And again, we've provided some assistance with CARES and FEMA reimbursements in many municipalities. So I will go through this part fairly quickly because I suspect you probably all know what the American Rescue Plan Act is. And if I had to guess, I bet you've probably read a lot about it, but I know you probably do have folks that are watching online or in person, so I'll just give you the basics. So the American Rescue Plan was signed into law on March 11th, 2021, and it created this coronavirus local fiscal recovery fund. They use the acronym CLFRF. The federal government loves acronyms, so this is the latest one. The intent is to provide support to state, local, and tribal governments responding to the impacts of COVID-19, as well as to contain COVID-19. So Acushnet is eligible to receive your ARPA funds both directly, and then there's a piece that you get through Bristol County because you do have a functioning county form of government. So what are the allowed uses for ARPA funding? Well, there are 4 broad categories where it's allowed. So you can use it to respond to the public health emergency or its negative impacts. This includes things like assistance to households and small businesses. You can also provide assistance to nonprofits or aid to any industries that were hit very hard by the pandemic. The second category, and we'll go into these just in a little bit more detail as we get through. The second category is in response to workers that performed essential work during the COVID-19. I said perform as if it was past tense, but we're still in the pandemic, so we're still performing COVID-19 emergency by providing them with premium pay. That's an option that some cities and towns in the country have decided to move forward with. The third is that reduction in revenue category that we spoke about that allows you to bring back some general government services that you may not have been able to fund because of a reduction in your revenue if you had it due to the pandemic. And then the fourth category is to make necessary investments in your infrastructure, specifically water, sewer, and broadband. There are 2 very specific uses that are not allowed. One is you can't use the funds to deposit it into a pension fund. And then the second is you can't use it directly or indirectly to offset a reduction in your net tax revenue, resulting in any sort of change in law or regulation. So that first category that we talked about, the public health and economic, these are just some examples of the type of projects that can be funded through that first category. And these are pretty obvious. And many of these were covered through CARES and now will continue on through ARPA should municipalities choose to fund them. Things like vaccinations, monitoring COVID-19, contact tracing, protective equipment for your public safety personnel, support for vulnerable populations, so members of your population that were impacted negatively by COVID-19 and need access to medical and public health services. Any sort of prevention and mitigation in your public facilities. I'm sure you saw a lot of that when your facilities had to kind of be redesigned and restructured to allow for social distancing. That continues in ARPA. Again, payroll and benefits for public safety and public health staff. The caveat here is to be eligible in this category, their time has to be spent, at least 50% of their time has to be spent on COVID related, which is a little more difficult than you would think if you're talking about funding, public safety folks out of this bucket, but we'll talk about that a little bit more. Any sort of improvements to your public health system that relate to COVID, and again, that economic assistance to populations. Some communities choose to do utility relief and rent relief and mortgage relief. Those all fall into this category. The second is that premium pay for essential workers. So this is a provision in the legislation that allows you to provide premium pay for employees that worked in person or had regular physical handling of items that were also handled by others. So your workers that were there working in person during the pandemic. Employees that teleworked are not eligible. The intent here under the interim final rule, which is what the document that the Treasury Department uses for this program, is it's intended to maintain this continuity of operations. It's the workers that maintained your continuity of government, so to speak. They maintained your critical infrastructure. They kept things going for all of us in the country. So healthcare, public health, public safety, childcare, education, sanitation, transportation, food services. Those are just some of the obvious examples. And there are limits on the amounts that they can be paid. But if that's something you're interested in, we can certainly get you more information on that. The third category is that revenue loss that we talked about. Again, you can calculate your general revenue loss, and then that includes the majority of your revenue. There are some things that get excluded. We exclude, according to the guidance in the legislation, we exclude any other federal funding, refunds, proceeds from issuance of debt or sale of investments, and then income generated by utilities and insurance trusts. So those get removed from the calculation, and then you do a comparison on all your other revenue. It's calculated at 4 points in time, the end of calendar year 20. We'll do it again at the end of calendar year 21, 22, and 23. I won't get into too much detail, but this is the basic formula that you have to use for your revenue loss calculations. So they have you look at the base revenue year, which is the full fiscal year before the pandemic. So that's fiscal year 19. And then there's a formula that's set in the legislation that we have to use, and it's called the counterfactual revenue. What that basically is doing is it makes an assumption in the formula, and it's consistent across the entire country for every municipality that has to do that. But it's an assumption of what your revenue would have been had the pandemic not occurred. Then you take your actual revenue for the calendar year that you're calculating. So the first one we would do is calendar year 20. And then you compare what your revenue actually was in calendar year 20 to what that counterfactual revenue is, what it would have been had there not been a pandemic. And that's how you come up with your estimated revenue loss. So if you have a loss in this category, that's the amount that you can apply to that category to fund general government services. I will say, we haven't performed your revenue calculations. I have no idea if you have a loss. We have some municipalities that do, and some municipalities that don't. I have one municipality that did an override, so that really skewed their numbers. I have another municipality that just really had a good collection period in calendar year 20, so they did not see the revenue loss. So it really depends on your numbers and what you look like during that period of time. So what type of projects can be funded through that revenue loss category? Those are your general government services. So this, I would say, is the category that gives you the most leeway. Anything that you would typically have funded as a general government services can generally be funded out of this category. Things like infrastructure and road work and work on your buildings, cybersecurity, IT work, health services, school educational services, police, fire, public safety. It really runs the gamut. It's a pretty general category, and if you have the revenue loss to back it up, then you can fund some things out of that category. Again, the things that you can't use the general government services, it's very specific. You can't use it for obligations, for indebtedness, for borrowed money. You can't use it for a settlement agreement or a judgment, for any restructuring of debt to a judicial or administrative proceeding. And then you can't use it to replenish your financial reserves. So you can't use it to, say, put in your stabilization fund. And the final category is the investments in infrastructure. So those are projects that they include water, sewer, and broadband. So the water and sewer projects are aligned with the EPA's Clean Water and Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. So typically anything that would have been funded or eligible under those two programs would also be eligible under ARPA. You can include road work. So if you are doing a water and sewer project and have to rip up the road, restoring that road can be part of the project. It also can include stormwater, which many municipalities are choosing to do some stormwater work. The one caveat there is that it has to have a water quality benefit. And then finally is the broadband. So there are some specific rules in terms of broadband, what you can use it for. You have to exceed certain download speeds if you're improving your broadband, and they really want you to focus on unserved or underserved areas in your community. So next steps for Acushnet. Ultimately, the select board will decide which projects you want to get funded through your offer. I just wanted to mention some of the models, and you may already well know exactly how you want to go about doing that, but these are some of the models that we've seen in some of our other communities. So in some communities, the select board and the administration already know exactly which projects they want to do, and they just need assistance kind of determining the eligibility. Other communities, they really want a robust kind of public outreach survey, and they want information solicited on a website to solicit ideas, especially in some of our larger municipalities. We see that public outreach really becoming a big requirement for them. But if that's something that you're interested in, we can certainly provide that assistance. A lot of communities, their department heads and their town administrator formulate that potential list of projects, and then they present it to the Board of Selectmen for consideration. If that's the model that you wanted to use, we could help with compiling that and determining if the projects are eligible prior to that formal presentation to the board. That way things that are not even necessarily eligible for ARPA would not even come before you for consideration. And then the last one is we have a few communities that have formed these ARPA working groups with members of the community that are making recommendations to the board in terms of what projects they feel should be funded. And in those communities, we're helping facilitate those working group sessions, and also, again, making sure that whatever is being proposed is a project that would be eligible. Just a few things, this is the last slide, I promise, is just things to consider in terms of that project selection is, are there specific projects that you as a select board already know that you really believe should be funded through ARPA, just to make sure that those are highlighted and on the top of your lists. I mean, no one knows the community as well as you do, so I think there's some thought should be given to what type of projects are the most important and most long-lasting that can benefit the citizens of Acushnet. Do you have a capital budget plan, and do the projects that you're going to fund through ARPA kind of align with that capital budget plan? Would you like to use some sort of a matrix or a scoring system to kind of evaluate the proposed projects and then prioritize them? If that's something you're interested in, we've done that. I can do that for you. And then the other thing is to consider is whether or not you want to designate any funds to nonprofits, businesses, or residents that were impacted by the pandemic. We do have some communities that have chosen to do that, and some have not. But if that's something you choose to do, we can certainly help you with setting up any sort of program guidelines for those type of programs. And then the last and final thing I'll mention is when we talk about that revenue loss section, if you are thinking of funding any kind of general government services, just to always keep in the back of your mind that that is non-reoccurring revenue. So eventually the ARPA money is going to go away. So you just want to be cautious of what you're funding in terms of operating expenses. And that's it.
Very good. Gentlemen, do you have any comments or questions?
I do, Mr. Chairman, I got some,
And then Mr. Gaspar.
if you don't mind. I got just a couple of brief things written down here. How do we differentiate what projects are clearly eligible for ARPA funds? So you talked about the Board of Selectmen may have some ideas, and we've thrown some different things around, but how do we navigate that without wasting too much of your time if we decide to go with CSS? How do we know, ahead of time, or do we just compile some lists prematurely and submit it to you folks, and then you folks can kind of go through it and scratch them off and say, yeah, no, and kind of knock it all off, and then we know that there's only 2 out of the 10 that we submitted to you, and you say, we need more information on these 2, but the other 8, we don't foresee you being able to get funding for it out of ARPA. What else do you have? Or these are some recommendations we're seeing going on in other communities. Do you have anything like this going on in your town, so we're not spinning our wheels and wasting too much time trying to pick a name out of a hat?
Right. So it's a little bit of a combination, I think, of exactly what you just said. So I think, if you decide to move forward, we'll give you some guidance right off the bat. That some are going to be very obvious to you. I think you'll know right off the bat that they're eligible. It's pretty cut and dry. And then there's others that what other municipalities have done is the select board will give a list to the town administrator. Town administrator will pass it on to me, and we'll just do a quick run through and get back to you in writing of what we believe is eligible under the IFR. Nothing overly complicated. We'll just look at the projects and say yes or no, and this is why, and this is maybe not why. Sometimes there's a few that we'll need some additional information on. So for example, if it's a broadband project, I might ask you what the speeds are going to be. I had a bridge project that a town wanted to do a bridge, but we had to have a water component. So I may have to ask some follow-up questions, but typically it's not too laborious, and it's really just an exchange between the town administrator. We can do it that way. That's how we've done it in other communities. I will say, you mentioned something that's really important. It really is coming in handy that we're working in multiple towns, because we do see a lot of the same questions coming up in other municipalities. So it is nice because we can say to you, hey, Southborough is doing the same exact type of project. We already know that it's eligible, and this is why. Or, hey, Dunstable wanted to do this utility program, but this is kind of how they run it. So that has been a nice part of it. We're kind of seeing some overlap between the communities, which I think is helpful for all of us, honestly.
Right. And then there's some language in your other packet that you had provided us, and I just said not to get caught up in. I don't want to get caught up. I don't think we should be getting caught up in projects that might be eligible for reimbursement, and you write it in your other packet, or would require matching funds from tax revenue, i.e. loans or grants that require payback. As noted, for instance, in the COVID-19 pandemic recovery funding portfolio and in your financial procurement and administrative support lines inside of this packet here, if you can see that. It's the opposite packet that we didn't go through, but there is some things in there. So, like, say we have a great idea, and there's $1 million out there, and we have this great idea. What are you talking about, like reimbursement and loans and grants? So, like, I don't want to get caught up in, okay, we're going to do that. Then the board makes a decision to go ahead with a project, but then we find out that we're not getting funded, or what's the reimbursement language, and then you have some grants and loans, and we'll will we be told by CSS that that's not reimbursable, but you can get a loan at this percentage rate, and is paid back by this, and it is coming from tax revenue? How do we split that and say we don't want anything to do with loans or grants that have to be paid back versus the ARPA funding that's, I hate to say free money because it's never free money, right? There's no free lunch. But, the money that's supposed to be coming in for project eligible projects. I mean, how do you communicate that with a town saying, like I just said to you, I don't wanna be in the hook for tax revenue down the road and paying back a loan if it's at 1% or 2%, and it's $1 million. We can do that pretty much anywhere, I guess. It depends on your bond rating, right? Dictates your percentage of your borrowing costs. So we got a great bond rating. So how do we know that, and how do we keep that separate so that we don't have people going off and saying, well, we want to do this, but then we find out 6 months down the road, we get a bill and saying, hey, you got to pay that. Is the money going to be in a kitty, a separate account through the treasurer, and you say it's eligible for expenditure and we move forward with that project and everything gets paid out of that account? Or is it like some grants that I've seen before in the town where it's like, hey, you're getting this grant, but you're not getting it from us, you're gonna pay Peter, and then we're gonna pay Paul back 6 months, and then you can put that back in your account?
So, it's not like the latter, so it's not like that, which is good.
Okay.
So you're right, it's a set amount that you're gonna get through ARPA. You don't have to worry about loans or grants and matches. There's nothing in ARPA that you're gonna have to worry about for that. The only one thing that Acushnet has that is different than some of our municipalities, but not all of them, is that you're in a functioning county. So some of our municipalities are in what they call a non-functioning county, like Middlesex or Worcester. So all of the money goes directly. But Bristol County, much like Norfolk County, you got a portion of your money, you actually already have it. It's in your bank account already. And then you'll get you'll get the other half of that at the end of the summer. It's a year from when you got the first disbursement. But then there's this other component that comes through, it gets funneled through Bristol County. Mm-hmm. So I suspect Bristol County is much like Norfolk County, so you'll have to send in your project requests through the county. But that's the only other additional layer that you would have to worry about. They're gonna do the reporting on the county piece for you. So you'll have to provide information to them up front. But it's much like you talked about, it's in a separate account, it's held separately and listed separately in your general ledger. You'll decide which projects you want to do, and then the projects are set up specifically like that in your general ledger accounting system, so that any expense that's associated with that project will get charged directly to that ARPA project, because that's how we have to report it as well. And there's no commingling of funds, there's no matches, there's nothing you need to worry about. We put that language in there in case there's other grants or opportunities that you need us to look at for you, and if you don't, that's completely fine. We don't need to do that. I think y'all know the infrastructure bill is going to come out next, so we'll tackle that when it comes out too. But that's going to have a whole nother set of rules that we need to look at when that guidance comes down. But in terms of ARPA, it's completely separate. No matching funds, no grants, no loans.
Right. And I only have one other comment. If we were to go to CSS, how can we assure ourselves CSS won't take on too many communities and Acushnet get left behind, i.e. miss deadlines? So I know that y'all, there's not a lot of consultant firms like yourself that are doing this, and if there is, I don't know about it. But how do we know, you're already working for several communities, how can we assure ourselves, or how can you assure Acushnet that you're not gonna take on, 25, 30 municipalities and, you're dropping the ball on Acushnet when we're trying to look for information, we're not getting the feedback, deadlines are being missed, if that's how the nature of this is, the scope of this is gonna work. How can you assure us that you won't be taking on too many communities, getting buried in the weeds, because I know you don't have a large staff.
Right. So we just simply will reach the point where we're not going to take on any new clients. We're not at that point now. I can tell you we're at about probably 65 to 70% capacity when it comes to ARPA. But we know full well that once we get closer to that threshold, that municipalities that we're not working with, we just won't be able to take them on. We're certainly not at that point yet. I wouldn't even entertain the idea of bringing you on because this is all I'm doing. My entire full-time job for CSS is just managing ARPA funds for communities. So, and I like to do stuff well, and I like to make people happy, and I want to make your lives easier. You know, I've lived in that world for a very long time, and I understand the pressures that you're under. So I would never want to create any sort of a false promise or false expectation. So we would only take you on if we had the bandwidth to do it, which we do at this time. But you know, we very well could reach a point where we don't take on any more additional clients.
Excellent, thank you.
Jennifer, I have one question, Dave DeRoche, because you've answered a lot of them that I had. When you talk about the distribution of money from the county, is there any timeline on that? You mentioned that we've already received half of the money allotted to the town, which I believe was around 500,000?
It was like 566, I think.
566,
Yeah.
so we can anticipate that same amount of money coming in in June, July, fiscal year, something.
Yeah.
But the county money, how does that all, how do we take that into account? Do we have to, you mentioned we have to apply to the county to get it released, is that correct, or is it?
So, you know, you would be my first client in Bristol. I have clients in Norfolk, and so I can tell you how it works in Norfolk, and maybe Julie has some insight into what Bristol is doing. I suspect it's probably pretty similar. I think most of them are doing it the same way. So in Norfolk County, you could request your funds, as we did in the town that we represent. And then on a project-by-project basis, you send in your request for projects, and then it's a portal. It's an actual portal that they set up where you enter in the information. Mm-hmm. And then anything that they need to report to the federal government, I believe they'll extract out of that portal. So I'm not sure if that's what Bristol County did. I mean, whatever system they have set up, we'll handle it for you if you choose to move forward with us. But again, I'm not sure, and maybe Julie already knows, or they could still be working on it. Some counties don't really have that flushed out yet.
Yeah, so Bristol County is still finalizing everything. They actually just finished getting their portal together, and Melissa has been on a few meetings today, and I think one last week, where they're introducing the portal to the accountants. They're trying to mirror it to like the CARES stuff, so I think it'll be a lot easier for people to pick up. But yeah, I mean, they've been pretty behind, I think, in terms of other counties on how to set up, how they wanted it set up and how they're distributing it. So we're just starting to get that information now.
Very good.
Yeah, but I do think it's very similar to what Jen just said about Norfolk.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Wona, any?
I think, you know, the presentation was outstanding. First of all, thank you for your help on the CARES funding.
You're welcome.
Must have done a good job, because every time we checked with Julie, we always had money in the CARES account. So we must have found a lot of money underneath all the rocks and took advantage of everything that we had.
Listen, you're my favorite client. You maximize the funding right to the top, which is what you should do. So great job.
I mean, I think this is just more a broad comment. I know the board and Mr. Gasper has been a real champion of big projects such as water and that type of infrastructure. I probably would tilt more along the lines of one big signature aspirational project and leave some money aside for mini projects that might satisfy some community needs. But I don't know that I would be in favor of 65 different projects with applications and a lot of administrative oversight. I'd be more along the lines of one signature project that would eat up most of the money and set aside a fund for, to take care of some small micro projects, if you will, or mini projects in the town. So for whatever that's worth, gentlemen.
Yes, very, very true, Mr. Wona. I'd still like to have a meeting with FinCom to discuss this money and how collectively we can use it. Just expand upon the Board of Selectmen's ideas and get ideas from FinCom or comments and where they stand also. So, but yes.
I mean, ARPA aside too, gentlemen, I mean, we'll decide where we want to go with this. If it's on an hourly basis, or I don't know if it's a retainer situation, but as we're going through our transition, and it's going to be a transformation of our town government with, as we're looking to fill some key spots and maybe opportunities to consider this firm for other things that we have going on in town that, who knows, we'll see how that unfolds, but I like what I see so far.
Very good, very good. Well, Jennifer, Nicole, and Mike, appreciate your time tonight. And we take some time to think about this, and not too much though. And and get back to you with a decision on how we'd like to proceed.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate it.
And thank you, folks, as Selectman Wona stated, thank you guys so much for the help with the CARES Act funding. I know we have been.
I'm so sorry if I didn't hear what you said.
I just wanted to echo Selectman Wona's words when he thanked you guys for the help out with the CARES funding. I know we had a lot going on. Miss Hebert, Miss Fogg, Melissa Fogg, our town accountant, our treasurer, Kathy Muller. There was a lot of things going on, and like you guys identified in the day-to-day operations, and thank you guys for coming in and offering up that help and, doing what you did for us to utilize as much as we utilize. It was a great help. So as a team effort, it was great to have you on the team. So I think that goes a long way for us as a board to make a future decision about using CSS. So we really appreciate your help with that.
Thank you. It was a pleasure working with them. They're wonderful.
Okay, thank you.
Well, very good. Thank you, and have a good evening now.
Have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Great. This is very informative. Very informative. All right, next on the appointments, we have annual license approvals. See attached list, but I don't know if I have an attached list or
You should.
somewhere in the back of my book here.
Yeah, it's just a bunch of names like we usually do.
Right.
You should.
I think last year, didn't we we approved all of them that didn't have an issue, and then if they did, we just held those off to the side. I don't know if we have to read every single one, do we?
Oh, what's that? I'm sorry, Mr. Wona. I didn't hear what you
I
said.
know, I seen it.
I think I recall last year, we approved all of them
That's
that
right,
were
that's right.
paid up and in good standing, but we didn't have to go through each category, each person, each license for every category, right?
I think you have to. We have to.
I think every year we have done every single one.
Like,
Yeah.
the common vic, and we went
Yeah.
through and read them all. I thought that somebody had said a few years back that
That's protocol now.
you have to go
Yeah.
through and you just read the address and you don't have to, I don't think you have to read the person's name, just the country whip is the first one on the list, 1175 Main Street on the common vic license. You don't have to go through the first name, so. We do them as groups, right? So if you want,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I can start off and just go through the common vic. I'll start with common vic.
Well, certainly.
So under common vic, Country Whip, 1173 Main Street, Seafood Hut, 2 South Main Street, Rochelle's, 590 to 594 Main Street, TC Donuts, Dunkin' Donuts, 150 South Main Street, Jeffrey's Pizza, 161 South Main Street, The Mill, 156 Main Street, Captain's Place, 162 South Main Street, Silverbrook Farms, 934 Main Street, American Legion, 71 Hope Street, Cam's Cuisine, 132 Main Street, Century House, 107 South Main Street, Blue Point Restaurant, 6 Dayton Street, Blue Lantern Cafe, 605 Main Street, VFW number 7239, 28 Roosevelt Street, Ponderosa, 242 Robinson Road, Rivers End Cafe, 7.5 Tockenhill Road, JT, 77 Slocum Street, Keith's Orchard, 1149 Main Street, Acushnet Creamery, 264 Main Street. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye. Take a list.
Aye.
I know, I took your job as I read it. I apologize, Mr. Chairman, it's just something that went.
Yeah, I'll read the bottom half.
So as long as everybody's in compliance with everything, and I think there was one that was getting a hold of us tomorrow that's on that list, so, pending approval from Mr. Merritt's letter. We don't need to read that out loud, but as long as everything's in place, it's approved.
Okay, very good. Next we have All Alcohol Club, American Legion, number 265, 71 Hope Street, VFW number 7239, 28 Roosevelt Street. All alcohol license, Cam's Cuisine, 132 Main Street, Captain's Place, 162 South Main Street, Century House, 107 South Main Street, Blue Point Restaurant, 6 Dayton Street, Blue Lantern Cafe, 605 Main Street, Rivers End Cafe, 7.5 Tarkland Hill Road, Ponderosa, 242 Robinson Road, JT's, 77 Slocum Street, and Acushnet River Valley Golf Course, 685 Main Street. All alcohol package store, Scuttlebutts, 590 South Main Street, Chuck's Liquors 2, 172 South Main Street, Bonneville's Market, 142 South Main Street, Town Wines, 1 Middle Road, Jason's Variety, 270 Main Street. Gentlemen, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Want to continue on the top half?
Sure. Restricted Music, American Legion, 71 Hope Street, VFW, 28 Roosevelt Street, Cam's Cuisine, 132 Main Street, Captain's Place, 162 South Main Street, Century House, 107 South Main Street, Blue Land Cafe, 605 Main Street, Rivers End Cafe, 7.5 Tarkland Hill Road, Ponderosa, 242 Robinson Road, JT, 77 Slocum Street. Automatic Amusements, American Legion, number 265, 71 Hope Street, VFW, number 72, 39, 28 Roosevelt Street, Blue Land Cafe, 605 Main Street, Rivers End Cafe, 7.5 Tarkland Hill Road, Ponderosa, 242 Robinson Road, JT, 77 Slocum Street. Mr. Chairman?
Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next on we have Class 2 license, used car. We have Repwell Corp., 734 Main Street, White's Auto, 211 Mill Road, Hayes Street Realty, 3 Hayes Street, Ted's, 308 Middle Road, South Coast Premium, 127 South Main Street, Shawmut Auto, 118 South Main Street, Murray's Auto Sales, 75 Lambert Street, South Main Street Entertainment, 16 South Main Street.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
When it comes to the Class 2 licenses, they're required to carry a bond on the warrant for warranty things. I would just ask Ms. Leonard, and I know you've been out, Ms. Leonard, but are all our Class 2 licenses current with their bonds?
Right now we are. We get new ones as the year comes forward when we start giving out the new licenses
So
out.
January 1st?
Right. we start that.
Everybody will be required to resubmit?
And some of them go for like 2 to 3 years, so some of them are still in compliance at this point.
Okay.
But once we do this, I won't give out the license unless we get the bond.
Or somebody's bond's still active?
Right.
From a prior
and
year?
a lot of them are still active.
Okay, excellent.
Also, Class 3 license, junk, Repwell Corp., 734 Main Street, Ray's Sales and Service, 4 Morton Lane, Laycock Auto, 1256 Main Street, Fred's Collision, 36 Slocum Street. Gentlemen, do I have a motion to approve?
Mr. Chairman, is everything in compliance with the conditions that you put on? You gentlemen approved the Class 3 last year for Repwell.
I received a letter today from our inspector, and it does not state any non-compliance issues per se. So, as in compliance, I'm relying on the gentleman who went and inspected. Yes, Lisa?
Yeah.
Just the-
So, we did get something from the stormwater agent regarding the stormwater.
That's correct.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So he's still, they still are waiting for some compliance items that weren't addressed yet.
Well, it mentions EPA designates junk and salvage yards as hotspots for stormwater and requires a long list of compliance items that have not been addressed as today. But prior to that, he also states that there is no evidence of any liquids leaking from junk cars at this time. So, I have no issue. I think the as with any license that's issued by this board, it can be revoked at any time. If you remember correctly, this was a situation we had at the beginning of this year. And Repwell's license was not granted until May of, what is the, do we have a copy of it here?
17th, I think.
May 17th. And at that time, had no tires stored outside of the ground. Area used for business 250 by 300 feet, 500 feet from the road. Limit of 70 vehicles for junk. And I believe Repwell also holds a Class 2 for 50 vehicles, which would give them a total of 120 vehicles, which I don't believe there was any exceedance of that amount of vehicles on the property when inspected.
No.
Compliance with EPA and MDEP stormwater and NEPD's filing requirements. License is non-transferable. No storage for profits. All issues addressed by building commissioner regarding drainage must be attached.
So I guess we're waiting for compliance on some of the conditions that are here, according to the conservation department.
Well, I don't read it like that. He went out and inspected and he saw no violations. I also talked to the engineering firm that's handling Repwell as a client. Engineering firm assured me that there's work being done on the property. I believe it's, where's Jim's letter? Let me just,
You have a contract with that engineer that you see?
I didn't see any engineer. I talked to representative who's doing the engineering for Repwell.
Okay.
As I mentioned, we can revoke at any time. I'm not here to put businesses in town of Acushnet out of business.
Neither am I, sir.
Okay, and I'm here to work with them as this goes along. We can look at this again in 3 or 4 months. If we see absolutely no progress, we can reassess at that time. So, I'm putting together a motion to approve these licenses.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. Licenses granted. All the licenses are granted. Very good. Town administrators report.
Okay. A couple of things I wanted to share with you all that we were given the FY22 Community Compact IT grant. Let me just pull up a copy of it. It was for, let's see. 54,000, sorry, I'm just getting that page here.
Yeah, 54,300.
Thanks, Lisa. And so this was the grant that Chris Oliver applied for before he left. And it's for infrastructure upgrades between Town Hall, Parting Ways, and Station 1 of our fire department. The capital assets for this project would include a new modular core switch in our server room, stackable edge switches, more robust and reliable uninterrupted power supplies, and new fiber optic cable and optic modules connecting Town Hall Annex to the fire department. And I think you'll remember when Chris came to our meeting to discuss applying for this, we talked about the grant that's going to be available in March. That will include more fiber optics, and it's a project that he was looking forward to doing to kind of connect the town as a whole. So this is a very competitive grant. The fact that we got it means I think we have a good chance of continuing on and getting the municipal fiber grant in the spring, and it would be a huge upgrade for the town in terms of IT. So I wanted to share that with you. The next thing that I have is ZBA consultant discussion. Essentially, I just wanted to quickly touch base. The Zoning Board of Appeals, we lost Amanda as the meeting minute secretary, I guess was her title. A while back, she's been helping out. She's been very gracious to help out so that zoning doesn't fall behind. They have appointed a new meeting minute secretary, but in the meantime, there's a lot of knowledge that kind of needs to be passed on. There are a lot of particulars and deadlines that the zoning board needs to take note of. And so if it's okay with the board, Amanda would be continuing to help out just to train the new person so that they can kind of touch base with, everything that needs to go on. And right now they have the money in their budget. If you remember last year, we added a little extra to their budget. So as it stands now, they can cover the cost of kind of having two people at the same time. But I just wanted to mention it to you so that if we hit the end of the year and there's a slight deficit in that account, you'll already know why and, have been part of that discussion. So I don't know if you have any comments or questions on that, but.
No, Ms. Hebert, I've been engaged with that conversation, trying to resolve that issue for this new individual that's gonna be taking on that secretary's job. So she does require, the position does require some training and to make sure the job's getting done and done right. And Amanda Baptiste is a sweetheart to actually say, yeah, I'll do it again. And she's done it several times in the past, if you alluded to. So, at some point you gotta stop training people for free. So it's not that much money. We can figure that out on how that's gonna work out. I think it's just a base hourly rate that's gonna be applied to that.
Yep.
Because I know there's a $75 for doing the meeting and the minutes for that meeting, and then you're an hourly rate for advertising and things of the like. So whatever amount of time she spends, she'll submit, a record for payroll and continue to get paid. And like you said, if you run a deficit come the last 2 months of the fiscal year, we could always get a reserve fund transfer to cover any additional expenses.
Yes, I think it makes sense to hold off. You could do a reserve fund transfer right now, but you may not need it, or you may, it's hard to tell the exact amount.
Yeah.
It's a small budget. I don't anticipate this really breaking the bank, so you have the ability to kind of wait it out and see what you can do at the end of the year with some, interdepartment transfers, whatever, to cut it.
Sure.
So, just kind of wanted to bring that up so it was on your radar. And then the last thing I have, again, just kind of putting it on your radar, the state is coming up with another shared street grant round. It's going to open in January. I know we applied for it originally and got the money to do the Acushnet Riverview Park, which is great. We applied a second round for Slocum Street sidewalks and did not get that accepted. I'd really love to try to reapply to Slocum Street if it was possible. I don't know if, we applied in the last round the last time, and I think it was more competitive, and I'd, be interested to look into that and see if there was any changes that we could make to the application that might make it more favorable to be accepted this time. But between that and or if there are any other projects that you thought would be appropriate, I just wanted to put it on your radar so that you guys can make sure you think about it and come up with a good plan for an early application, so maybe you can get some money for the shared street grant. So.
What do we, I apologize, Mr. Chairman, what did we say we were doing with this IT grant? Because as everybody knows, Mr. Oliver's leaving the school department as our tech guy. So is there a time frame where this grant would have to be executed upon and expended, or how long's the grant?
You have to sign off on the grant no later than December 30th.
And then we have 45 days, well, it'll be distributed within 45 days.
Yeah, the report has to be received no later than February 15th, 2023, so you do have some time to get it done.
That's a year and a few months.
That seems a lot further
Yeah.
than
Is
you say
Mr.
it, but
Oliver
it is.
still employed at this current date? Because he's the one that applied for it?
No.
If I remember correctly, CSS, that company that came before us, don't they help with IT solutions and things of that nature? If I remember correctly, part of their, I think that maybe this is something that they
They've
could help
definitely done a lot.
You saw website design, and that's
Yeah.
what I remember off the top of my head, but we'll be discussing our IT situation along with our other vacancies, the spots that we're gonna need to fill over the next month or two. So we do have time. We do need to sign this and get it off to receive the grant itself, but we don't have to implement the grant for another year after that.
Yeah.
So
I think it's, it's definitely an important tool that you'll need as a town. I wouldn't want to pass up on it. I'm sure whatever solution you have for IT will be able to kind of pick this up and keep moving with it. And especially like that with the municipal fiber grant coming up in March, with the potential for a lot more money. And again, the municipal fiber from there would be able to connect the town as a whole. It's gonna save on a lot of, I mean, it's gonna be a huge impact on the security of the town, the cybersecurity, but also it saves a lot of money in being able to combine services. So I think, yeah, I mean, whatever solution you guys come up with for IT, this is definitely worth continuing to invest in. And again, the grant was very competitive, so the fact that we were given the entire amount that we asked for, I think means that we have a really good chance of getting the municipal fiber. They're investing in this now, knowing that we would be looking for the fiber in the spring. So I think it's a really good sign for us, and I'd hate for you guys to miss out on it.
Okay, very good. And that's it?
That's all I have, yeah.
Any selectmen announcements?
Merry Christmas and Happy New Year if we don't speak to you before then.
That is true. Future business, we do have a selectmen's meeting for Tuesday, December 28th, 2021 at 4 p.m.
I didn't know if that's what you guys wanted to do, keep going
Yeah, I believe
I
it.
think you should have
to
something posted there, right?
Well, we'll announce it. I mean, we announced it, and we have.
We actually have one Friday.
Right.
I guess, right? We'll have a meeting this Friday.
That's correct.
This was already made before we did that one, so.
Oh, that is correct.
Jeff,
Yeah,
I
we
would
do have a
suggest that
meeting.
we have it posted, and then if we have to cancel because of, with Julie, it would be essentially Julie's last meeting,
Mm-hmm.
and just want to make sure we have that option to button things up before we, move on to the next chapter.
But let me just, as it was just brought to my attention, also that we do have a meeting for December. We posted it.
17th,
December
at 11 a.m.
17th
For what?
at.
Oh, that's Friday, executive
Yeah.
session.
Yeah.
Executive session
Yeah.
for that.
That's not important to the public.
So, okay, there you go. Gentlemen, at this time, we're going to adjourn to executive session under General Law, Chapter 30A, subsection 21A-2, to discuss strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, or to conduct negotiations with non-union personnel if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the position of the public body, and the chair so declares. And the board will not return to public session. Review of matters presented, votes may be taken. Roll call vote, Mr. Warner,
Yes.
Mr. Gaspar,
Yes.
and I am a yes. We are going to adjourn to executive session, not to return. Good evening, everyone.